Hi everyone. Jed made an incredible introduction to Keystatic. I've been working myself on Keystatic for 3, 4, 5 months, and watching this talk, I was like, damn, this thing is really cool. So you sold it pretty well. I just realized I don't have my clicker. So, officially, hi. Before I start, I'm interested, is anyone in here not technical, doesn't write code? Jed, yeah? Because Jed touched on that, and I will also touch on things that I think are interesting to you. My name is Simon Vrachliotis. I am a senior developer and self-proclaimed dev role at ThinkMill. I've added this to my role. If you're not familiar with the developer relations role, it includes making a lot of cool videos and demos and playground projects. And I've done this for the most of the past 3 years. You may have seen some of my work on the Tailwind CSS framework, where I was running the YouTube channel, doing YouTube videos. And thank you. And more recently, I've been doing very similar things for ThinkMill, talking about that thing called Keystatic that we're talking about tonight. So, like I said, on and off, about 4 times full month. It's actually nearing 5 months. I don't know if you noticed, but up to a few minutes ago, the definition on the website said 3. But when Jed asked me to do a cheeky approval PR, I thought I would do my own PR sneakily and update. So that's a screenshot of the live site, actually. And this is what the PR looks like. I've literally just went into, like Jed did before, I logged in with GitHub, didn't touch my VS Code, and I just changed, and it pushed the pull request for me. But I merged myself, sorry. So I've done a lot of playing, experimenting, but I've also shipped a few things in these 4 months. The very first thing I shipped is this site called Better Dev Screencast. It's a blog I write where I teach people how to record and produce and edit videos and make them pretty good, especially for developer audience. And Jed touched on this website. We've built this. Actually, the ThinkMill website got built before I think even Keystatic was a thing, or it was very, very, very low-key. And we retroactively retrofitted Keystatic into it later, which we'll talk about. And very recently, we've shipped this new website. You may have heard of this SydJS meetup. If you haven't, you should check it out. It's pretty cool. I also work on real client projects. This is a production live project using Keystatic. I want to say this is the most comprehensive use of Keystatic I've done to this date. Almost everything on the website is editable. There's a real client with real needs. And this client can literally tap my shoulder 24/7 because this client is my wife, Heather. So there's stakes here. So I feel like with all this playing and all this shipping, I earned a certification star to give you some of my opinions of why I think Keystatic is cool after multiple weeks, months of working with it. So let's dive into that. I'm going to give you a few points of what I think by using Keystatic for this time is really cool. Number 1, this is the most important part of the talk. Make sure you look. Arguably, it hasn't much to do with Keystatic, but there's no way I'm leaving this stage without showing you my beautiful puppies. These are little corgi puppies. I have 8 of them. They turned 6 weeks on Monday. And I want you, this is actually the big brother, same parents from the previous leader. And I want you to appreciate the drama and the stunts that this little black one is going to do. Check the roll. And then watch him roar back. There, I had to get it out of my system. I'm sorry for the inconvenience of you watching beautiful puppies for 20 seconds. I know it's not really related, but is it? I don't know, this looks like a Keystatic website talking about puppies to me. Is it a real project, or did I just do this to allow myself to introduce puppies? Who knows? Okay, so now let's get serious. Number 1 reason why I love Keystatic. It doesn't change how I would build websites if I was building them for myself. And I think that's pretty cool. So let's take this UI. You might recognize it from Tailwind UI components. There's a pricing page with 3 plans. And if I was building that, I would build in HTML or JavaScript, JSX, what have you. I would probably want to use some JavaScript data structure here for the plans, because there's some repeating data over and over. Probably something like an array of tiers, and then we have an object for each. So I have this array with 3 pricing plans, and then below in my JSX, I'm going to simply iterate over this data and then render a plan card for each. That seems like a reasonable approach that many of us in this room would take if we were building a site without any need for someone to edit the content, right? So for us developers, this is completely fine. It's actually maybe desired sometimes to be able to edit this instead of having a CMS interface. We can directly work inside the array, change stuff. But if you ask folks that are not technical to edit this, of course they could probably figure it out and change only what's within the strings and make it work. But there's that fear probably of breaking the syntax, and more importantly, just opening a JSX file in a text editor. This is a lot of barrier of entry that you asked me for. So let's say I have a friend that is not technical that wants to edit this. And what I'm going to do is model the exact same data in a Keystatic schema. So I'm not going to go into too much details, but Keystatic has a config file where you can define your different content types. Here I have a pricing page where you can see that I'm asking it to output the content in SRC content pricing. And I requested specifically the JSON format because this is the closest to my JavaScript array. So here's what we're going to try to do. On the right here, we have the existing array of tiers, and we're going to replicate the schema on the left. So we want an array, so I use fields.array. Inside of it, we want an object, because it's an array of objects, so field.object. Then I use the name, the ID, and you get the idea. I recreate the fields with the correct content structures until I have something that match. Almost, because I noticed I forgot the href. Well done if you picked that up. But you get the idea. I've created the same schema in my config file, and by just doing this, if I tell to my friend, all right, just go like Jay did before, go to /keystatic on this website, this is what they get presented with. We have a pricing page. We have these tiers with a little button that lets you add one tier with all the fields exactly like we want them. And so my friend goes and fills up a couple of tiers just to test it out. And once they've done that, this is the output. You can see an array of tiers with the exact data that was just entered. And it is output in SRC pricing, content pricing JSON, because this is what we've asked. So that's really cool. That lets my friends create tiers, but they still have to input that data manually. They will probably go on the website and copy all the features one by one and paste them in the admin UI, which is not the end of the world for 3, but if there were 78 pricing plans, that would be a bit hard. So what if we use the existing data that us developers already took the time to write and made that editable? What I'm saying is I want to take this array and I want to move it inside this pricing.json file, which is now bound to Keystatic. Keystatic is like, this is my file, I generated it, and I read from it as well. So this is exactly what I'm doing here. I'm going to grab from the start of the tiers array all the way to the end of it. So this is my JSX page. I quickly turn it to JSON format with transform.tools, but I could probably have hit save and it would have done it. And so now what I have in my Keystatic pricing.json file is the exact data that we want. So what do you think happens if I go back to /keystatic now? I bet you can visualize what happens, yeah? We've just made the original data editable. So when the friend goes back in there, ta-da, the 3 plans are here, and they have exactly all the data that was initially created. And the reason that works is because we've created a schema that matches exactly the required fields to mirror the JSON or the JavaScript array we had. And to drive this home, you can see I changed the plan to Keystatic, and I will add a feature called Hello SydJS, just so we can verify that we can pull that on the front end. So my friend hit save, all done. And so before we can see it on the screen, because the screen, the front end is still pulling this hard-coded data, we just need to do a minimal change. And it's, I mean, minimal if you think about it. All we have to do is take this hard-coded JavaScript array that we developer wrote, and then we simply get rid of it. And instead we import that JSON file that Keystatic is now editing. Because it's the same tiers array, the tiers variable, I don't have to change anything in my JSX, and it works. Look at it. It says Keystatic down there. And if I scroll down, it says, hello, SydJS. And so if we recap, we've made this whole pricing section editable by doing two things. Recreating the Keystatic schema that matches the structure that we wanted to be able to have that data, and then replace the hard-coded data with the Keystatic one. And I honestly think that's pretty cool. Anyone thinks it's pretty cool? Yeah. Good. Number 2. I'll give you a couple of seconds to soak in the brotherhood here. TypeScript. I was myself a late bloomer in TypeScript, and I was reluctant to learn, but projects like this really make me appreciate consuming something that uses TypeScript. So what I mean is, when I started learning Keystatic, before almost anyone in this room knew what Keystatic was, there was absolutely no documentation. Actually, until very recently, there was not much public documentation. So the way I learned Keystatic, of course, I could ask the core team questions, and I definitely did a lot. But the primary approach for me was to literally press one key on my computer and see what options are available with the autocomplete. And so you can see if I want to use a field, I don't have documentation on a field, but I can discover what's available. And so I want to show you the experience with TypeScript and GitHub Copilot of doing another exercise. Sorry for the light mode, apparently it offends some people, as I've learned on my YouTube comments recently. We want to create this data. This time it's the actual ThinkMill website. And so this is a live recording of me typing stuff. I think I pressed one key and then tap, 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 and nudged it a little bit here and there. But basically, you start typing, and because of the types, Copilot can figure out what you want to do. It's like, yeah, I know you need a label, and blah, 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 and it kind of suggests what you should do next. And you just sit down with one finger and press tab. And what I like is here you can see that this is a select field now. So as I'm putting options, it's squiggling, it's like, oh, something's wrong. Because it knows if you have a select field, it needs a default value as well. So until I put the default value, and now it's happy. And so this is how you learn how the schema works without having to read documentation. So that's the number 2 thing I really like. And these types also come with you in the front end. So if you pull some data, you will also have the autocomplete of what properties are available on the item or blog or something like that. Number 3, I think you start to see the pattern here. Keystatic works with the tools that I already enjoy using. And that's super cool. So my Better Dev screencast, the first site, was built with Next.js. But the ThinkMill site, as Jed mentioned, we built it with Astro. And Astro has this really cool concept of content collections. So content collection is basically a convention where you have a content directory in your source directory, and then anything you put inside of there, any folder you put inside of there will become a collection. Any Markdown, MarkDoc, YAML, JSON, which conveniently are all the formats that Keystatic is working well with, will be turned into a queryable content collection with that nice little helper that this is from Astro, get collections. So you can see here, I await get collections, and I pass blog, which is the name of the folder or the config if you configured it. And then I can just loop over it. So behind the scenes, it does use a Node API FS that read file sync. I'm not even sure that's this one, but it does all the hard work of picking up the files for you and just presenting you with some data. And so this is exactly what we've done. This is the ThinkMill website, screenshot of the blog. And to build the blog, we already had built the Astro site with content collection. So what we did was create a schema for the blog, right? And we said to the path, may you please go to content/blog to make it a content collection. And then you can see that little star thing is where the slug of each entry will come. So basically doing something that Astro will be able to understand. And so we have this editable UI. I love that my theme goes from light mode to dark mode always, because I prepare slides at different times and outside and inside. That's pretty cool. There you go, back to light. So this is when you save a file, this is what you get. All the fields in the front matter, and then the long form copy, the body of the copy down there. And that, a surprise, surprise, gets saved in src content blog. And so we repeat the exact same process for other things that the blog needs, like authors or tags. And again, we put some files in there, and then we can use the Keystatic collection. We actually don't even have to use them because we're already using them. So that's the exact same screenshot as before. This is simplified code, obviously. But my point is, we were using Astro content collections. We've added Keystatic, and we haven't changed anything on the front end. We just made Keystatic put the files in the right place. And what's important to understand is Keystatic does have built-in tools to do querying of the file system. It has a really nice reader API that lets you get files and then render them. But it also is capable of meeting you where you are by doing minimal stuff. And that's what I personally really enjoy with Keystatic, is like use the parts that make sense on existing projects to make it work. And this slide, I deleted a few times. I had it in 5 or 6 places. It always comes down to this. It meets you where you are. If you start a new project, use what it offers. If you use something that Astro that takes care of the querying and rendering, you can use that. And Keystatic is not going to say, no, 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 you have to use my thing now and I'm taking over. That's cool. Number 4, Keystatic travels very light. It doesn't bring a lot of DevOps baggage, definitely carry-on luggage only. So typically when someone asks you, can we make stuff editable for the marketing team or the product manager, the thought process goes, okay, so I guess we gotta bring a content management system, which means I guess we gotta bring a database, which means we gotta have some DevOps needs because we're gonna have to maintain this. And also, we're going to mess up a lot of nice front-end workflows. You've seen on the ThinkMill website or the SydJS website all this GitHub niceness of pull requests and reviews and approvals and authentication and all of that stuff. When you use typically a CMS, you lose all of that niceness and you move the content authoring to either somewhere else, another server, or a third-party, a cloud system. And what about the content collections? I doubt that many content management systems are going to be happy to just output the content in src/content/blog. They're probably going to give me an API to hit, and then I'm going to get the data as well, but in a different way. So we would throw away, in a project like the Astro site, we would throw away a lot of nice stuff that we had already in place. But with Keystatic, you don't really have to, because, again, it meets you where you are. Number 5, yes, this is a developer-first workflow that includes non-technical people, the folks that put their hand up, under the fold. And that's really important. And what I mean, we're not creating a system, like I said just before in point 4, we're not creating a new departure from what we've been doing just so non-technical people can contribute. We actually bring them within the exact same workflows. This is a quote from me at the start of the ThinkMill website rebuild last year. This is before Keystatic. This is before we even know what the ThinkMill website is going to look like, or what content, or what design, all of that stuff. And so as a developer, I'm like, okay, let's just do Markdown files. It's safe. I feel like I can teach people how to read and write Markdown easily, and we can use it and query it fairly easily too. And then as the design gets a little bit more complex, you're like, you know what? Actually, let's use MDX because it's pretty cool to have a video, YouTube video embedded mid-blog post and have some charts and some interesting stuff as well. And so that's fine. But when comes the time where folks want to edit the site, turns out you can't just say, just edit MDX files, it's fine. That's not gonna cut it. I'm willing to bet editing Markdown file could work, but MDX is a whole other ballgame. You have to import components and use React-like syntax with angle brackets and pass props, and this is getting hairy for non-technical people. So instead of changing the stuff, they will ask for copy changes in a Notion doc, or in a Jira ticket, or on a Post-it note stuck on your screen with a squidge mark where they put the thumb when they press. And this is going to create a lot of feeling of nagging. And this is a two-way street, yeah? You, the developer, will be like, another copy change, this is not fulfilling me, I have to stop my meaningful deep work to just do some copy changes. But you have to remember that the person who asks the question knows damn well that they're nagging you as well, and the reason that they do it is not because they like it. Very importantly, they don't enjoy nagging you. The reason it happens is because there's no processes or structures in place to enable them to do the change. And they feel powerless. They're like, well, I wish I can't do this, so all I can do is poke and ask for an update and bump, and on Friday ask again. So I think with Keystatic, you can empower them to do more without really changing what you as a developer do. So it makes developer workflow inclusive and accessible, which I don't think that's an angle we think of Keystatic of, but I think it's an accessibility enhancement. Accessibility is about bringing content to more folks, right? Here we're bringing content editing to more folks. So in a way, that's an accessibility improvement, I'd say. And so I keep saying, bring people on the fold. What do I mean? Well, you had a little snapshot before, but Keystatic deeply integrates with GitHub workflows. So we're gonna take another example. Let's take a fictive person named Sharky, which is a non-technical person that wants to contribute to the website. So Sharky was granted a GitHub account with the access to this repo. So just like Jed showed before, Sharky can log in, and you can see that instantly, this is actually the ThinkMill website, the live think. So you don't want to mess with the main branch, but like Jed showed, you cannot push stuff. So I've instructed Sharky to see these are branches, you don't have to worry about it, but you just need to create your own branch before you do something. Or save in the main, and it's gonna prompt you. So the first thing Sharky is gonna do is create a, create a new branch, aptly named demo Sharky. And here we go, boom, you can see that now we are in the demo Sharky branch on the top left as well. And now, Sharky wants to write a blog post. There is no Sharky authors to be found, so the first step is to go and create a new author. So Sharky is gonna create a name, choose an avatar. Yes, I know everything about you, the Twitter handle, and then hit save. And after doing that, now Sharky can create a new blog post. So add a title, we're gonna publish it today, summary quickly. And then Sharky can find the author that was created on the previous step down there to assign themselves to the post. And the most important part, the really deep, thought-provoking post that is going to make it to the web. And I realize it's less of a surprise now, but once all of this is done, you can see we have this UI that says, one new blog post, or one change, one change. And what it represents, if you have the developer lens, it's like, yeah, that branch is like 2 commits ahead of main because there was 2 changes. So this whole thing is just literally a UI, a GUI interface over the GitHub workflow. The next step, I said to Sharky, don't worry about the terminology, just go create pull request. That's how we talk when we want to pull some code into the code base. And so Sharky presses that button and sees that what we're very familiar with. And if you look at that, you're like, not a big deal. Like you could have created 2 markdoc files with front matter. But I'm willing to bet that some folks don't really feel comfortable First of all, you need access to the code base, and you need to find a way to push it to GitHub. There's more nuance that you think of. And doing it through admin UI that felt just like using a CMS, like creating a Facebook post or a tweet, feels much better. But as a developer, you can see behind the scenes, behind the facade, what happens. It's literally create to file plus the image down there, push, create a pull request, and then at this point, you can decide if Sharky is the one opening the pull request or us developers take over. I said, just leave a meaningful comment and open the pull request. And so as soon as it does that, the other thing Jed was mentioning is we have all this CI pipeline. We have this deployment preview that is triggering. It's using GitHub Actions here, but you can use Vercel as well. And I have to instruct Sharky, just wait a couple of minutes while it builds, because it's rebuilding the site, and then you will have a link. When that link comes, you can click there, and you will be taken to the actual, this is not the live site. You can see the little Vercel comment UI. And here's Sharky's post. We can see the avatar, the intro, the blog post, the Twitter, everything is there. And Sharky never even, except pressing GitHub login and clicking create pull request, Sharky has no business knowing about what GitHub is and how it works and what is branch and forking and all that stuff. Well done, Sharky. Round of applause. He did really well. Number 6. Yes, you can count. I always check there's the right number of puppies. As cool as the GitHub integration we've just looked at are, my jam is to get rid of it. Sounds silly, but my jam is the local mode. This is like the developer power mode, if you want. You can think of it as Keystatic light. You strip out all of the GitHub integration, the GitHub UI. Keystatic is already pretty light, but it makes it even more minimal. And so in the config, this is currently set to the storage strategy of GitHub. So you need to pass the GitHub repo, name, author. And then you can remove the whole repo. It's going to squiggle because until you change it to local, which is the other mode in Keystatic. And you've entered minimal Keystatic lightweight. You can see the UI. There is no branches. There is no drop-down at the top left. It's just content editing. And it's now bound to your local file system only. It's not going to push anything to GitHub. It's not going to ask you to create a branch pull request. It doesn't even know about it. It's literally, yeah, in the config, tell me where to put it, and I will change your files directly. So for me, as a content creator that does a lot of demos which have to have visual feedback really quickly, it lets me prototype or build projects much quicker because I have the immediate feedback loop, but also to teach and demo Keystatic, it's always way more compelling, unless you're teaching non-developers how they can contribute. But if you want to teach developers, because I think it's also a great tool for developers, that's where the jam is for me. Let me show you what I mean. ThinkMill website, again, Keystatic admin UI on the left, front end on the right. I'm going to edit the projects. You can see Keystatic, Keystone. And so I'll change, just add Keystatic from Keystatic, add a little emoji, and I will also move it to the second place in the array, just so it's a little bit more visually feedbacky, and check what happens when I save. Instantly, live reload, boom. Hot reload, I now have Keystatic on the second row with the new text. And that's just one way of the editing experience. I'm a developer. I don't need the crutch of this UI to create stuff. It's nice if I want to use it, but sometimes I might want to edit the codes directly. So here I'm going to change, instead of Keystatic, I'll change to VS Code. Instantly, it's already updated. I just have to refresh VS Code, the browser for Keystatic admin UI. So it rereads the file that has changed. That is super powerful. And I said solo projects, but you can work with large teams with that approach. The only drawback or downfall is you cannot edit on the deployed side. You have to pull it and work locally on your machine and then push it. Because there's never something pushed to GitHub. You just do the changes. But when I push this again, or I can do a pull request if I'm in a different branch, I can still have that workflow. But it's takes away the ability for Sharky to log in without having to install the VS Code. Number 7. Yes, if you count the brother, that's 7. That was the hardest to find because I have 8 puppies, and whenever there's more than 6, they're all together. So I had to find one where, And there's no crop. I didn't cheat with cropping. I found a photo that had the right number. This is how I spend my time. Yes, flexible config option in terms of output, where you put files, how you name them, etc., makes it super flexible. So we've seen that already, when you create a collection, you can say in the path where you want it to go, please go to content, events, and then that little star, which is the slug. If you use images, you can decide in what directory they will go, regardless of where you put the collection. So you might be like, why? Why does it matter? Imagine you create a blog post collection, and you go to src content blog, but then you're using Next.js, and you're like, it's pretty hard to reference an image that is not in the public directory, because you have to import it and all that. So you can decide to, no, the images are going to instead go to public images, and I said blog, but I should say events. So it's outputting the image completely differently to where the actual markdown files are stored. And then finally, there's this public path property. It's a nice convenience to not have to do string concatenation, because if you didn't use that, every path would start without the slide. Like you can say, hey, whenever in Next.js something is in public, you can skip public. You just start at the next segment. So you can prepare your public path, and then when you go post that image, it's going to have the exact image path for you without doing anything, just because you configure. We've seen the format. I was asking for JSON before because I wanted to mirror a JavaScript array. The default format in Keystatic is YAML, because this is more common in front matters, in like static site generators. But again, you can choose that. And one of my favorite features, Keystatic by default, or not necessarily by default, but was ingeniously trying to have the ability to have multiple files to store data for one post. Most of the other tools out there put everything in one file, but there was this thinking of, what if I had directories and other files? So if I had an index file with all the YAML data, because maybe in some places I don't want the blog post, I just want the metadata, it makes it a little bit easier to query. But what we found out is that doing this sometimes is a bit annoying, because a lot of static site generators expect one file. So see how the document field long form copy here is called long text. You can use the content field in your format in the config, and this is going to say, take the field in my schema that is named like this, make it the body of the markdoc file, and then put everything else in the front matter. And so you end up with this traditional way that most static site generators or Astro or whatever tool you use. Again, screenshot from the ThinkMill website. It's actually V5, but on my computer it's still called V4, because we started with V4 the very first day, if you remember. So now my long form copy, long text, is that bit here put in the. And so all these configuration options means that Keystatic is really flexible and fits a wide range of scenarios. I'm going to show you a little demo of, this is the Earth design system from a client that we work with at ThinkMill. And so that's the design system documentation website. And the documentation for all the components in this prototype are maintained with Keystatic. So this props table and the buttons, all of this is actually, as I'm going to show you in a second, maintained in Keystatic. So I go in the button component, and something I haven't even mentioned, you can pull your React component in the admin UI. This is not a screenshot or represent of the button. This is the button. You can see the loading state here. So you can pull it in the admin UI. And I want you to, I'm going to pause the video here. I want you to pay attention that we have the path, packages, core, source, star, and then docs. So we use this star, which is the slug placeholder, nested before another path. Now, why would we do that? If you've worked with monorepos, you know there's a strong convention of packages and apps. So an app could be the website or the admin UI or something. And then packages are like the UI components and different packages you consume in these apps. So we actually here in a monorepo, and we like in a completely different part of the world of this monorepo with Keystatic, but we like, I would love my button to go to packages, core, source, button, because this is the button component, and then docs. And so what it does, if I show you the sidebar here, I'll show you this is where the actual Keystatic website is in apps and docs. But if I go in the packages, this is where the UI components are being maintained. You can see avatar, button. And the really cool thing is this is where we have stories with Storybook. This is where we have the actual preview of the button. We can collocate the Keystatic documentation right next to it for each component. Keystatic lives in a completely different part of the code base, but still within the monorepo. And we can say, hey, instead of having everything in a place where you have to find it, let's collocate it with all the other stuff that are relevant with this button. So that's super powerful. This is what the markdoc file output looks like, what I've showed you just before. So I'm gonna do a side-by-side comparison. You can see this button that says, click me. This is the equivalent of that one. So we're gonna edit it in Keystatic, change it to like, I am a cool button or something. And I've seen it before. And then when we save, watch what happens here. Boom. The code has changed because we're using local mode again. And if I change it from the code, look at what happens there. That was too quick, we missed it, it's already updated. You have this visual interface that you can use if you want, but you can also not use it if you don't want, but it makes it accessible to just about anyone, which I think is pretty cool. I know I said 7 things in my title. This is what happens when events get delayed. We were gonna present this talk about a month ago. A new thing came out, which is very cool that I wanna show you. Also, as a side effect, really cool bonus, this is what inspired this whole concept of showing puppies per number, because I have 8 puppies, and I ended up with 8 steps, and I was like, oh my God, yes, I can do a slide for each with like the count up. If I stopped at 7, I probably would not have thought of that. So just to make sure that's all of them 8, and the new thing, which basically encompasses everything I've showed you of the thing I like about Keystatic, is the new Keystatic CLI. Barney, who works at ThinkMill, he's not here tonight, but I want to give him a big shout out because he built that thing mostly by himself, very, very, very quickly. And the way it packages all the things I like that we discussed together is amazing. Basically, on your computer, after this talk, if you want, you can just type in the terminal npm create @Keystatic. And if you want to leave on the bleeding edge, you can add latest to always have the latest version. And when you do that, so far it's very simple. I'm gonna do the demo here. It's too small, but you don't have to read. It's say, hey, how do you want to call your project? You pick the default name, and for now, it creates a Next.js app using the app directory. The idea is to add frameworks like Astro, Remix, Svelte, what have you. Right now, it's just doing a Next.js project. But what I love about it is it's set up with the thing that I think are the coolest to iterate as a developer at least. It's set up in local mode. It's set up with the markdoc in one file and all the stuff that I think are really good configs to be productive and play with it as a first play. So this is the front end. You have a homepage with a blog post. And again, I love that it tells you, hey, this is one post you can edit from the admin UI, or you can edit from the code. So it introduced this concept of two-way editing. Hey, are you a non-developer? Use this. Are you a nerd? Use that. And so let's do this. Let's do both quickly. We go to admin UI, And it links directly to the right post, which is a nice touch. You can edit it. If you try to tab super quickly, you missed it, it's already changed, it's so fast, it's impossible to see. And then you do it the other way, really, really cool, tab really quickly, it's already there. And to me, that's it, that's the Keystatic CLI. There is one page, homepage, one post. It shows everything to get really excited, like I got excited in the step 1 to 7, and this step 8 wraps everything around. And I can very confidently tell you, if you want to play with Keystatic, that's the way, as a developer, that's the way to go. npm create at Keystatic. Yeah, it captures all I love about Keystatic. Number, no, I'm kidding, I'm going to stop there. So, there's a lot more I want to say about Keystatic, but I have the time for this. It was supposed to be 35, it might be a bit more minutes. Please ask me, actually, please ask any of us anything. All these beautiful folks right here. Keystatic.com is the place to go, and as you can see, you can click on that to copy it to the clipboard and get started. We have the Keystatic repo is public, and we have these GitHub discussions here. We would love if you try and play with it and see if you find use cases that are really good or maybe something that can be improved. By participating to these GitHub discussions, you can help us shape Keystatic because it's very much Play-Doh mode where we can shape something and try to understand what's the best use of it.